everyone. We're here on the unceded territory of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, and the Quel'Plu, I believe, of Rocky Harbour, Newfoundland. We're here in Gros Morne National Park of the conference room of the Ocean View Hotel, where we've been all week with the folks from the Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism and Saint FX and the COADY Institute. I'm here. My name is Joanna Killen.
I'm Brent Harris, and we're happy to be here in Rocky Harbour. We've been enjoying ourselves here for about 6 days, and we're really happy to get accepted into this program through the COADY Institute at Saint Francis Xavier. And we didn't even realize how competitive this program was until we got here, and we realized, there's 5 groups here from Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, Middle Musquodoboit, Nova Scotia, Beaver Valley, Ontario, St. Martin's, and us in St. John. But there was like 40 applicants.
Yeah, we had a stiff competition, and so being here with a whole bunch of folks who really care about their communities has been incredible. And they say tourism in the name of their institute, but their institute goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
They host a number of collectives and co-ops and social enterprises, and very much our type of people. And they believe that a good community to visit is a great place to live. So
yeah, other way around.
Oh yeah.
If you make a good place to live, it'd be a great place to visit.
Yes.
And we're both very politically active, and obviously we do this podcast. We banter about it every week, and then we have our own hats we wear on Common Council in St. John and provincial overlap. And this year at the end of last year, we obviously, if anybody's been tracking our story, you will know we had to endure a lot and navigate a lot with regards to, a candidate in Hampton threatening legal action against us for talking about them on our podcast. It would be Fatine. And that was well documented. We kind of showed what that looked like until it was recently dropped. Didn't even get through the investigation process, but whatever. And, with council having run in there when we stuck up for our local union and did our best trying to figure out how we could try to represent those workers as best we could. And that led into a whole tiff. And so we just left 2023 saying, you know what, let us get out of this lane of just embedded politics and let's find a way back to the community. And that's when you found this.
Yeah, so a shout out to Jen Nichols, who I've only actually ever met via social media because she follows me and we've become good friends. And she actually did this program last year with her work through the CBDC. And the difference last year was they had folks from like ACOA and municipalities and things like that, all individuals from individual communities, same amount of folks. But this year they went in a cohort style where we were grouped together with a team. So on our team, we have Tim Chafee from the Carleton Community Center. We have Innu artist Cassandra McLaughlin, who was St. John's artist in residence for a while.
Northeast Moon Art, you can look her up.
Northeast Moon Art. And we also have Katie Harrington, who currently is a supply teacher for the province and works for the
Community Resiliency Network. There's another C in there. It's like CCR. So it's something, anyway, it's about resiliency and creating resilient communities.
So superb team, in my opinion. And thanks to Jen for getting us here and just educating me on what GMIST has to offer, because ultimately I didn't know anything about them. But we have participants here from St. Martin's who we've gotten to know, who have taken part in some of their other programs. And if you're a small community in New Brunswick, highly recommend getting to know the Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism, because they can help you do so many cool things with your community. We spent a good day up in Cowhead, which is the northern part of this Gros Morne National Park. And we did a full day community session with them. They have a beautiful theater there that they're doing all kinds of theater arts with the students. They have a full summer slate of performances and have just like reignited theater in a very tiny corner and a very tiny amount of people who live up there. Yeah. But they have a massive tourist season here that kind of fuels the economy. But they have educated us on just how much opportunity there is for smaller communities. And we're focusing in on the Carleton neighborhood community in St. John. just to look at how we can sort of fire people up. And we left there with a lot of people saying how positive it was and how much more passion they feel towards their community and how they want to move forward. Cowhead, yeah. So we're going to be doing similar exercises here in St. John with the Carleton community and hoping that some of this spreads.
Back in St. John.
Back in the jig.
And we could flip the camera around, we'd show you a gorgeous view. I don't think the lighting will work, but maybe we'll post some pictures on our Instagram because it's just insane. You get here and it's just like southern Alberta meets the ocean, right?
Yeah, it's a stunning place.
And these little communities that are along here, this park, this national park's only 50 years old. So there was a massive effort that happened to get these traditional communities into a place. Some of them had to be expropriated, moved, that caused a big uproar. There was a real strong animosity originally in some of these communities toward Parks Canada and the Newfoundland government and everybody who would have joined in to try to make that happen. But I'll say this about the team at GMIST, which is Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism, which is this interesting collection of groups that, you have Gros Morne Cooperatives, which we mentioned. We
Creative
have
Gros Morne.
Creative Gros Morne, which talks about the artistic expressions, and the art around here is absolutely unbelievable. When we were in Cowhead, one thing we got a chance to study some of these different asset-based community development, citizen-led community development, I guess is a key. And we got to just go up there and offer it to the community. And, we had 25 residents come out and go through 20 really of us who were facilitating these exercises. And, it just brought it back to me in such a clear way. Because when we started this journey in St. John, when you put in the application and we got in, we were like, holy crap, like we were
amazing.
We were excited.
But what are we doing?
But what do you do? And as somebody who studied community development in the past, I knew enough to know, well, it's like you can't have an agenda. Like as soon as you have an agenda, you enter into the status quo version of development where it's like, here's a good idea, here's the person who's going to make this happen here, and here's the money to go do it. And then it lands flat, the community doesn't want it, it's seen as an attack, even if it's a great idea.
It's being done to them,
not
with them.
It's completely patronizing to the people there, it creates that, what's the word I'm looking for? Tokenization of the community, where it's like, you don't have anything good here. We needed to bring this person and this idea from outside. And we have that in St. John, and that was really what we zeroed in on early and what we are continuing to zero in on now, but with a whole different perspective. And it's because as counselors, we find ourselves in an awkward position, and maybe many others do in this province too, around the tourism sector, where, and certainly St. Martin's feels the same way, where it's like, is the 150,000 passengers that get off the boats to come here, are they actually of value to this community, or are they just extractional? And sure, there's a few niche markets like tour companies and trinket crafts groups sometimes that say, hey, well, I wouldn't have a job without them, so it's good. And I'm sure the port's like, hey, we love, the port fees that come with that. But as far as restaurants and other businesses and other residents, in my opinion, most St. Johners are not, they're usually surprised first that anybody wants to come here. And when you talk to business owners, they're like, yeah, we don't count on them for anything. Like they're not helpful. And so we kind of were like, okay, that's not helpful. And plus we have this community that we kind of call the lower west side of St. John that is disjointed from the cruise ship industry and tourism in general.
But very much affected by it. Like there's a massive port right in front of their community center. There's AIM. There's so much port activity that goes on directly next to them that like the fact that they're disconnected from the benefits of that is it's not great. And it's not something that I'm super happy about, having grown up there, knowing full well it's an amazing community, superior community of people of Carleton instead of Lower West, because we were like, realized like that's a very derogatory way to refer to something. And so just a thought around it this week was reactivating Carleton. Like, how do we bring back some of that vibrancy with the people that are there and the assets that are there without requiring any sort of outside investment or outside support even. And the whole concept around asset-based community development is you work with what you have instead of trying to think about all the things you don't, and I need a splash pad or I need this or that or the other thing.
Yeah, well, You
to
know,
make it good.
Yeah. If we just had this business come here,
Yeah.
or if we just had this company set up shop, or if we
Yeah.
just, you know, shot ourselves in the foot and gave tax forgiveness for decade to get this big business to come and save us, everything will be good. Like this BS, and I've often thought of it as BS, but the nice thing about the Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism and Parks Canada here and these communities here is that they're showing us, no, actually, it's not BS. Yes, it is BS, and here's the alternative.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is exciting, and that's kind of what we want to talk about on this pod. I know we gave a big preamble there, but we want to be able to find our way back into the roots of community and see that it's possible to use what you have, where you are, with who's there, rather than constantly being in this place of like, well, we didn't get the funding, or we don't get the attention of Fredericton, or well, we don't, you know.
And we're just as guilty as the next person of doing that and saying if we only had X, you know, then we would have Y. But in reality, that's just waiting for someone to come save us. And we're seeing it a lot more now, I find, even with this recent cleanup we just did, where community is like activating itself and it's coming along and saying like, I'm sick and tired of the garbage on the streets. I'm not going to wait for the city to do it. I'm going to get out there with a group and clean it up myself. And so that to me was a great grassroots example of what this kind of concept really is. And an example here in Gros Morne is, you know, all these people seeing tons and tons of visitors and like, oh my God, they're just like, they're only here, they're just passing through, whatever. And we have this whole concept of a leaky bucket, where the more money you can capture from the temporary influx, the better, you know, it is that those dollars stay in the community. And so they created this, it's like, hold on, the poster on the wall, Trails, Tales, and Tunes Festival. And they've created like, there's one community in Cowhead has like 6 festivals. So they've figured out how to capture as much of that outside, you know, economy in their own community for the time that people are here. And even GMIST, bringing us all here to hang out in the off season is another example of that. Where we've just like spent all of our dollars over at the little restaurant next door, or the couple of gift shops and things that have been brought to us. And they even brought in a stained glass artist to, you know, maybe in a normal way, we would visit her shop, like on a typical familiarization tour. But for this, they brought her in and we actually all made glass pieces with her that they're going to go display back up in Cowed where we were for the day. So it kind of this circular economy piece.
Yeah, and to kind of like give you an idea of the partnership here, Saint Francis Xavier has an institute called the COADY Institute. And so the story here around this is, I think, really applicable, just to kind of drop it off, because I think this is exactly the type of spirit and culture we were trying to bring back to New Brunswick, but also bring back to St. John specifically, and even more specifically to the neighborhood, the Carleton community of what currently now is known as the Lower West. But we want to change that. But Moses COADY was an individual priest, Catholic priest, who was in Antigonish, you know, over 100 years ago. 100.
Yeah, he was born in like 1913, something like that.
Yeah. So, and you know, this was a community that was not thriving. Obviously, they had the university, but other than that,
very extractive.
It was very extractive, and you know, people came from outside to go to this university, and there was some industry built up around it, but there was a lot of struggling, especially in the fisheries, which was kind of the main industry there, just like many places in the Maritimes and Newfoundland. And you know, one of the things that they discovered as Moses COADY started to try to do work, and if you're familiar with the Catholic Church here at all, the Catholic Church does have a really unique social systems theory that they work from. Like even, I talked about it on this podcast before, even systems such like that you may or not have heard of, and it's an economic form of distribution called distributism, which is
actually founded it around Antigonish as well.
Yeah, it's a hybrid, really. Well, it kind of comes before that from G.K. Chesterton and his writing with trying to remember his name, Barrett, another individual. But G.K. Chesterton, famous author, he did a lot of writing back and forth on economic theory with this gentleman who I'm sure his name will come to me. And that kind of established this conversation around this different way of looking at the market and how to localize the production rather than centralize production. Anyway, I won't go into the details around that, but the Catholic Church picked this up in a major way, and G.K. Chesterton was a Catholic and talked about that with different priests and different groups. And so Moses Coady would have had some of that to dig into, this idea of, how do we find something that can be universally accessed by as many people as possible, that can be an asset for our community and give strength and prosperity. And so, these fisheries that were struggling, they started to find ways to bring a kind of focus on a unique species that wasn't something that was very harvested before, which is lobster. And in doing so, they created a huge industry around this sea bug, for lack of a better word, that wasn't a very widely eaten product at that time.
And they also went to great lengths to make sure that their local community was making the rope for the boats,
Yes.
making the traps, making sure they were the ones, canning it up, making sure they were the ones processing it, so that it was not something that was going off to even like Halifax or
they're not calling down the
Boston.
road. That's right, to find stuff. So that was where Moses Coady came in.
Yeah.
He helped establish these little funds and these initiatives to fuel the fisheries from within, so that all the purchasing stayed within that community, create a real circular economy around production. And they landed these lobster, and they started to find ways to market those and to sell those. And what it created is really kind of an example of a distributist idea, because if you're familiar with the lobster industry, there really isn't a giant company that does all the lobster. There's just 1,000 fishermen who have a quota and a license that gets passed down, and they have a small boat or a couple of boats that go and harvest and tend to that and trap. And so it's a very different approach than something like Cook Aquaculture would do with a caged salmon or salmon in general, or even like Brunswick Sardines does with herring, right? Like that is one company, and it has all the fishermen under their company name, and that company is now a multinational organization, and blah blah. And
But they haven't infiltrated the lobster fishery in the same way, which is super fascinating to think about 100 years later, from when Moses Coady and the gang were out there trying to redistribute the wealth of a sea bug.
Yeah.
So the theme of this week is like, where's your lobster? Like, where is that? What is that unique thing that locals can hold and generate wealth and sustainability off and through? So it was so neat to see all these different rural areas, and we're different because we have the power of a city behind us, and some of them, like poor Musquedoboit Valley, lamenting that we're beholden to HRM. Like they are technically part of HRM, but are an hour outside of it in a rural agricultural type of area. So the challenges some of these places face are extremely great, and we felt fortunate that at least we have a lot of partner ideas and a lot of places we feel that will align with what we're going to try and do. But ultimately, it will be up to the citizens and the residents and the associations, institutions that exist within the Carleton community to decide how they want to do that. And we're just kind of the guides in the process.
Yeah, you could call us facilitators, but we're also residents. We're just around the corner from the Carleton community. And I think one of the big differences with how traditional community development is done currently, from what I've seen, not just in St. John, many places, even those groups that talk about asset-based community development, because it is a school of thought, it's not very often citizen-led, right? It's top-down. It's like, oh, well, here's a neighborhood development officer that works for the city that is doing community development in this neighborhood. And then the question is, do they live in the neighborhood? And the answer is often, well, maybe, maybe not. And then it's like, well, who are the champions on the ground owning this position for their community? And then it's like, well, we have a few volunteers and here's the staff person. And it's not the same, right? As when you go to a community and you build that corporate citizen power. That's a bad way to say it. Corporate's not the right word, but that communal, empowering, or cultivate that type of soil so that people are able to find good ideas to create opportunity in their community and then plant it there and see it grow, because they have the connection to each other and to the assets that every single person brings and connections that they bring to see it thrive. And it's a really hard way to do it because there's no guarantees of the outcome, right?
No.
If your outcome is to go in and set up a food bank, and you get there, you may find out that the community doesn't want a food bank. The community would rather have better access to its own produce, which means you actually have to help that community find ways and connect to opportunities to grow their own food because they're not looking for that same kind of service, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a little piece of the puzzle here to say, look, when you really get into community, from what we've seen in Cowhead,
Yeah.
in one day, all we did was a couple hours there, and we took them through 3 exercises that really kind of peel back the onion, if you will.
5 of them, actually.
5 exercises, yes, sorry. And help peel back the onion layer. You were able to see how even their own minds were like, oh, right, we have that person who knows this skill who could probably help with this. I don't have to be going down to, Corner Brook or Deer Lake to get this done. And people were really starting to get around the leaky bucket, around knowing what opportunities there are already, and then seeing new opportunities. Like one young kid from the school was like, look, there's no entertainment here in Cowhead. That'd be like, we have beautiful terrain, we have trails, we have fishing and stuff, but there's not a lot of entertainment. And so you take that step a little further, you say, okay, there's somebody who cares about the problem. What is there in that community to help wrap around that to kind of go after a solution? And what would that look like?
Yeah.
Right? Well, it's probably not going to look like him calling Chuck E. Cheese and getting a Chuck E. Cheese franchise brought here.
But it may be like a few arcade machines at the local theater or wherever, or the school. And it is about that piece of around like looking at what you have, who can help support, and not any one person carrying the load. That it is a group effort to create a thriving community. And there's already so much happening at the Carleton Community Center under Tim and Jen's leadership. So it's kind of a place that's ripe for growth there, because there's already a lot of people that we've already even met that really care about that place and really care about the community surrounding it.
Yeah.
There's just about to be the Harbor Passage Trail is just about to finish in that neighborhood, be completed all the way to it. So there's just a real sense of excitement and hope, I feel. But we're going to be spending a lot of weeks figuring out what the best course of action is. And they like to say here, it is simple but not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like we said, the problem point and the pain point right now is that the Carleton has this legacy, and it still is a thriving community, and it's still open to others. Because we tried to start this in a different neighborhood, and we just realized early on, like, this neighborhood and the folks that are involved don't have any margin for this.
It does take margin.
It takes some margin, and like, it takes some intention, and it takes, getting away from not to try to, poo-poo this community, but to get outside of that victim mentality can sometimes be hard when you've had a hard time, right?
Yeah.
When things have been hard, it can be hard for you, and it seems like the reason that it's hard is coming from out of town because, hey, this is the 4th person that we know whose apartment's been bought by some person from Ontario, and they've rent-evicted everybody, and now this group has had to come along and figure out how to pick up the pieces for yet another family who has nowhere else to go in our community, and low literacy rates and all that. It's like, we can certainly appreciate that margin can be limited. But even in places where there is limited margin, there's always kind of these opportunities if you can create the environment to discover them and discover the people who have those assets. And we found that really easily at the Carleton, but we are seeing that there has been a loss over the years based on some conversations with residents. So it's like, okay, let's go over here to Gros Morne. Let's see some of these groups do it from people who have done it. And they didn't get, millions in dollars in federal money or provincial money to make it happen. But eventually they did because of how impactful the work they were doing became and connected the communities came. Gros Morne has 7 enclave communities that live within the national park.
2,000 square kilometers of land.
Yeah.
People are really spread out, and the enclave communities they're basically carved out of the park, so they're their own municipalities. So that means, 7 mayors, 7 councils, 7 clerks, 7 of everything. And so they have a big challenge of all getting along. So I often think, about our region, right? Like we're all trying to regionalize, and we've had some great conversations. I love St. Martin's people so much, just about the challenges they face that we had no idea about when it comes to some of this regionalization stuff. And they're trying to, same as us, like get outside of the political spectrum and do something themselves for their community. Because like we often just, and we're seeing it, right? Like politically, we're seeing it like everywhere, that this is Trudeau's fault, this is Higgs' fault, this is, the Liberals, the Greens, whatever, like you can say every political party, insert name here, it's their fault. And so, but we're the ones that make it up. We are the fabric of the community. And we'll probably get like that for the amount of times you're saying community in this podcast, but.
Oh yeah, take a drink if you hear us say community again.
But actually though, we have that power in our own hands, and letting ourselves give it away to some random political person. And it's kind of funny because there was a real distaste, shall we say, for politicians among the people. Like we're the only two that were here elected. So, but we had some amazing conversations with people because they were so happy that, we made the choice to come here and sit with the ones in our community that are actually doing a lot of work for it, and sit with them to try to figure out how we're going to move forward. So yeah.
So it's exciting. It's good. Like you'll track along with this with us because the two go hand in hand. Politics is in deep need of a reformation.
Yes.
About how it's done, and I'm not the first person to say that. I certainly won't be the last, but I do think there is a place where we can create powerful communities who are connected and develop more pathways toward their own self-sustaining activities. They increase how much money they spend locally. They care about, seeding local enterprises, social enterprises, nonprofits, businesses, whatever it is, to kind of onshore the means of production because, we can't necessarily rely on our supply chains, and the big groceries are skimming a lot of profits. So there's obviously money to be made. And why wouldn't it stay here, right? I think, politicians have often been so hijacked by, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'll explain it, the neoliberal agenda, right? Which, to break that down, it's just the idea that, capital is king and it will go where it needs to go as opportunity is made, so that the most possible goods are made for the cheapest price possible, and that the supply chains are as, I guess, resilient as possible. But we've seen how that doesn't really happen when all of a sudden things that you used to do locally are now found overseas somewhere, and there's a disruption, there's a war, there's a Suez Canal blockage, like you name it, right? And I think politicians need to start changing the way that we do engagement with people, so that we aren't the ones coming in to say, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. And if you have communities that, by the way, I think this is true because Colleen, one of the girls, God, she's amazing, kind of, I don't know how to describe her. One of a kind woman. She's like really kind of seems rough around the edges and local, and she's got that Newfoundland accent, but she knows her. She's been at this work for community economic for a long time. She does way differently than most others. Like I've walked with her multiple times when we were having a smoke together, and and we'd be talking, having a great conversation about Jack Harris, the NDP person from St. John's, Newfoundland, or whatever, because I would get into my geek political stuff and talk to her. And then all of a sudden, some woman would walk by, and she'd be right over next to her, talking to her what's going on. And then all of a sudden, she was talking about a therapy session she had, and how she's feeling better. And all of a sudden, like, Colleen is just ingrained into the community here. She comes from it. She knows the people. She's close to the people. And everything she set her arm to with her is with her community. Yeah. And everybody, it's different. Like, no one rolls with the red carpet for her. She just walks into the living room. and it's just like the best way I can describe it. Like
so on point.
And then everybody, when she asks and calls people to help, they're there. And she will say, like, she is still learning the hard lesson of not taking it all on herself.
And not taking things personally. Like, she works works super hard to bring together this region, because she's the Gros Morne Cooperative, I believe, head and creative, like she's.
Gros Morne Cooperative
Yeah.
and Gros Morne Creative, yeah.
Yeah, so she's in charge of this big initiative and has to work with, very fancy Newfoundlanders and, MPs and things like that. But she also, like you say, everyone on the street knows her. So she's able to bridge this like gap between these two worlds in order to help benefit everybody that's here. But she also said, bringing people on board for things is an incredibly arduous job, and you need to practice forgiveness a ton, because, and we've come up against this, we've talked about this here a little bit before, where everyone does have the best interests of their communities at heart. They just have different ways of how they're going to get there. And so the way we might think it is different from the way Jimmy or Johnny or Sally or Susie might think it. And so, but that doesn't mean that you don't all care about what you're going to be doing. But it will take time and effort and energy in order to come to a consensus about how to do it and to have everybody on board. And I think Colleen's a great example of somebody who's taken that time, like step by step, walked with people, walked with their intentions, figured it out.
Yeah.
And if there's disagreements and whatever, she forgives, she moves on and continues, because we all got to live together.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not, she's like right now, it's like, well, I'm going to form government and I'm going to undo everything Justin Trudeau did, or I'm going to form government and I'm going to undo everything that Blaine Higgs did. And it's like, by the way, that doesn't help us figure out how to live together.
Yeah.
Right? Just saying that those over there are wrong because I'm right isn't actually practicing anything that is supportive of sustainability for our communities. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but politics right now is not very sustainable. Like, you have extremes that are occurring because two sides have become so entrenched they've forgotten how to talk to each other. And that's just going to get worse the more we reward it, right? We turn around and we reward governments with majority governments. They get to walk around with their hat on for another 4 years thinking that they're God's gift to the green earth. And that is dangerous. And I think that's what I mean by like the power of these tools that we learned. And I mean, we could talk about them maybe a little bit. You mentioned the leaky bucket exercise, but the idea of getting together with your residents, with people who live there, and creating these little moments over a shared meal to start to figure out what is already in the room, what can you leave right that moment with to do, and what do you need to kind of continue to meet around, so that you're going where the energy is rather than trying to create something from nothing. And it's funny, we do this in politics the same way we do it in farming, and the principles are very similar, right? We look at what's worked somewhere else or what we want to grow, and we say, oh, well, I want to have wheat grow here. And sure, you can till the land hard, you can do all the work, you can add all the fertilizer, and you can strip it off and do all that work, and then shoot yourself in the foot, because now that soil has lost all of its biodiversity, all of its life, and it needs those implements now just to do anything. And then it becomes more fragile, it's more drought. When drought happens, it's not resilient. Pests come along, it's not resilient. And we do that in politics too, where we've taken these ideas or we've taken these political positions on issues, skipped over the idea of talking about it as a community, and just tried to go out and yell about it to see how many people agree with what we're yelling about. I would say the policy 713 issue is very similar to that, right? It's because you had some governor down in Florida making a big deal about pronouns in school and how all these things are happening, or what they think is happening anyway, and then you get a politician like Blaine pick it up and say, oh yeah, it's bad here too, and then like, we think parents need this and want this.
Yeah, very top down, very hierarchical, did not come from community. They can't even prove that in court. And now you have, we got this, thank you, Terry, a wonderful listener who sent us, because we're a little bit off grid here. We're recording this on like just the computer, we don't have internet.
Yeah, there's actually no power right now in Rocky Harbor.
There's no power.
There's no lights on, this is the sun coming in, my phone's down to like 10% for.
Yeah, we're pretty much off grid. But Terry sent us this, we got a Facebook message about Minister Hogan trying to end the Department of Education Council in East
Moncton.
Yeah, in Moncton area, because they're going against his thing based off no evidence and no consultation and no arduous methodical work. And one of the great things we heard from a lot of these groups, and they agree with us, and I love that, is that they feel that their government is a business and not a thing where a place where the people convene to do things for everybody and for the betterment of society.
Yeah.
And so all of us are here, and the pattern was real, and it was that, we're sick and tired of business and development and all these types of things having a bigger power and say in how our communities work and run.
Because it's a lot easier. I'll tell you what. Like if we wanted to make our government work for business, it's a lot easier because there's big business that can afford lobbyists to come and give nice fancy presentations who are paid nice wages to go and do this work and to find the lawyers and to find all the loopholes and to find all the shit and hurl at us in a meeting over a 10-minute presentation. Then we get put on the spot and asked to make a decision about it. That's what's happening right now in your government, by the way. Like this is how government decisions are made. They aren't made when a bunch of politicians come back home and sit down in the kitchen for an hour and a half to try to figure things out with you. That's not happening, right? There are interests that want to keep you out of the equation, and not to be conspiratorial again, but we've just seen it and seeing it here with other bureaucrats from other places that work for cities that are like, we can't do this anymore. It's like destroying the fabric of our community. It's blah, blah, blah. It's putting us in these risk positions. And, one community here has gone through 5 CAOs in 3 years because of the positions of their council and, all this stuff. And it's just like, right. So what it would have looked like with Policy 713 is a slow, methodical, fair conversation setting around tables where there was equality and listening for years.
Not rage farming to get votes.
Yeah. So that's hard work. It doesn't happen on a dime, but whatever the outcome would have been, it would have been sustained. Because even though there could be people who are like, I still don't agree, still hold out, and there's a bunch of people that we agree, we're holding out. That's going to happen. It can happen. But at least you grab and you make and you cultivate an opportunity for neighbors to talk to each other about this stuff rather than, well, I'm on the blue team and I think that there's a gay agenda out there trying to come and groom my kids and all this, right? Easy to do that work. Hard to go out and prove who the person is that's trying to groom your kids, right? To like, I'm making this conversation into something more minor or into a very specific example here. But that's kind of what we mean when we talk about this. And I think there is, when we talk about doing politics differently, where is the energy right now? Like, sure, there's 1,000 issues we could think about. Policy changes. I'm encountering this on a housing initiative I'm trying to do, and I'm still not sure whether there's real community energy for this change around putting resources to attack vacancy and to really drill into that. I'm still not sure. Even though I put it out to the community, I've done personal videos. We've got a team around it, an initiative around it called Vacant to Vibrant. We've raised $15,000 sort of in this community bonding, lending kind of arrangement that hasn't been finalized. So we haven't accepted this money, but it's been pledged. And I'm still in this position now after this weekend where I'm like, okay, there's some energy, but are we seeing enough of a groundswell of residents yet who really care about this solution and their neighbor enough to get behind it to get it done? Because sure, I could take this money, go push it, go get maybe some more funding from another source, from an outside source to leverage to bring in to do this. But I'm not 100% sure yet whether we are there yet as a community to steward this properly. So that, just personally, that sinks into me and it sets in to say, how we've even done council decision making and setting our priorities. It was really
us deciding, not really going out to the community to understand them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Because what I realized too about this week is that, Facebook and just like quick conversations and meetings and things like that don't really get to the heart of a place. And it takes a lot of time to get to know a group of people. And so spending an extended afternoon, a whole day like we did in COAD, was how to do that. It's not, when you show up to a meeting with a presentation and a PowerPoint, you're not going to get the same amount of people as you do when you sit there and, co-create something.
Yeah.
So big light bulb moments this week when it comes to how I approach things and approach the future of being in politics and how to not be somebody that just comes with what my ideas are and shove them down everybody else's throat. But, because a lot of these people would be people we would see in public hearings and we would see advocating for issues and things like that. So it was incredible for me to be able to sit and co-create things with them as the person who usually has to sit on the other side and listen to the concerns they have and not really deeply understand their point of view. So, yeah.
Anyway, it's been a journey.
It's good. It's like it very much is based in 100 years of thought, and our facilitators, Gord, Addie, John, Darlene, and Colleen, and
Nora,
all Nora, like all these people live and breathe this stuff, and this is completely sponsored for all 5 of us to come here and learn these things.
We couldn't believe that either. That was the other thing. We're like, if we get accepted, holy smokes, how are we going to afford to come here and do this? That wasn't a problem. They have gotten investors together who have bought in and seen the difference that getting people equipped with this understanding and these tools and this approach to, community development, they've seen the difference it makes, and they just want to see it done more widely and in these different parts. So now this program called Activate, it's only 1 year in. We're the second year, and they've got funding for another 3 or 4, and which is crazy because our accommodations are covered, our meals are covered.
We've had the best food in the world this week. And we had the high school
lots
kids.
of moose meat.
The high school kids made us a meal. The women from the Anglican Women's Auxiliary made us a meal.
The community wants us here.
Yeah, and they all came together. We had these beautiful community suppers and lunches, and it just, very inspiring to see them wanting to invest in Gros Morne and invest in us, who are going to be those tentacles, if you will, who go out to all these different areas, from Ontario to the Maritimes, to do these things within community. And they keep up with us until December. We have some assignments we have to do.
We get a certificate at the end as long as we pass.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. But we have some homework we got to do.
Yeah, and it's academia combined with actual living lab combined with community and practice. So big fan of them doing this and inviting us and accepting us.
Very thankful,
Very grateful to COADY and GMIST and Saint FX for this opportunity. And hopefully we will see lots more of this type of thinking and approach in New Brunswick, because I know you all, have seen the surveys, you've seen the invites to, quote unquote consultations, and hopefully we can move forward in a way that you really feel heard, seen, thought of, and understood as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think we can, ideally, you, our listeners, demand more. I think if there was something for you to do, it's, you can
yell and scream on Facebook and Twitter and all those places all day long. You can. But there's also something to showing up for stuff like this and showing up for those in community meetings or whatever it may be, getting on associations, doing the thing. Because the echo chamber is not it.
And finding out where in your community things are happening, and when there's a problem, gathering people genuinely around it, around a meal, and it's a lot of work. There's no question about it, but someone's going to have to do it, or else we're going to keep going in the same direction we're going in.
And they love you just to exist on the internet instead of actually in
real life. If you want to organize a nice rally in Fredericton, and then go home and then go on the internet and have a group chat about it once in a while, we're going to continue to see the same results. If we're gonna improve things in our communities, then it's going to have to start with having strong communities. And the only way to have strong communities is to start doing work together, shoulder to shoulder, having a framework to work from that helps us see the abundance and the assets that we have already, that don't require us to wait around for someone in government or someone in business to come and save us, and to start making the change we can see and want to see in the context we have. And that, we're going to report back on what that approach looks like.
And we know we're going to get
but-
beaten down. That's been a huge theme of this week too, is like you will come up against it when you start to try to do this stuff. So fully aware of that. We'll have to remind ourselves to come listen to this again because we're fresh off the energy of a bunch of people who have drank the Kool-Aid, if you will, of this approach. And but I think it's worth a shot,
Yeah,
It's
well,
worth
what
a
we got
shot.
right now is not working very well.
Yeah.
The old flip-flop and from one party to another, just to put them in charge in government, but for there to be no real substantive approach or change in approach. We're not seeing more voters come to the ballot box. We're not seeing
Candidates
more.
sign up.
We're not seeing more healthy riding associations for these parties. Like it's the verdict's out on what's going to happen with this election. But I think the one thing that we can agree on is that there is a really good way that we could be doing it.
Yeah.
And we've seen it happen, and we just need to find ways to just make those opportunities happen with our neighbors. And that's where you all come in. So if you're following us, stay following us. You're already doing the right thing. If you're not, keep in touch with us. Go check out our Patreon. I don't have the ability to click a button to show you it across the bottom here this week. MB Polypod is our Patreon account. You go to patreon.com/NB Polypod. You can find us here on socials. We're going to put some pictures up of Gros Morne and our fjord that we went to today on socials. We will keep in touch about this specifically. And I think maybe one thing we can do is track, because we have to do it for our GMIST program anyway through COADY Institute. We'll try to put something on that Patreon, especially that we push out to everybody, highlighting the journey, the tools, the pictures from those moments, the connections, the stories that come out of community, and then eventually the results. Like, we have some really big dreams for the Carleton community, but we have no clue whether we're going to get the grassroots of that community together in a way that could accomplish some of those things, and maybe many others, right? So the verdict's out. It's an experiment.
Sure is. That's the point.
But for now,
Pilot.
That's right. That's a pilot. I think we're going to sign off this week. Thank you so much. Sorry we don't have the nice fancy editing and title page.